When the United States officially entered World War II in 1941, one word dominated the country: urgency. There was no room for doubt, no time for moral debate. The war demanded men, and it demanded them now. Thousands rushed to recruitment centers driven by anger, patriotism, fear, or the desire for revenge after Pearl Harbor. Most carried the same certainty in their eyes: to survive, you would have to kill. It was in this atmosphere that a thin young man, soft-spoken and humble in posture, walked into a U.S. Army recruiting office and said something no one there was prepared to hear. "I want to serve." The sergeant looked up, studied the young man, and asked the routine question, "Do you know how to shoot?" The answer came firm and unexpected. "No, sir, and I don't intend to learn." The silence that followed was heavy. That young man's name was Desmond Doss. He was not a coward. He was not a rebel. He was not a political pacifist. He believed deeply and without compromise that taking another human life was wrong, even in war. Raised in a simple home shaped by faith and discipline, Doss grew up hearing biblical stories and learning that every life had value. To him, the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," came without footnotes, without exceptions. And yet, he did not run from the war. He wanted to save lives. The United States Army hardly knew what to do with him. During the first days of basic training, confusion quickly turned into open hostility. While other soldiers learned how to dismantle rifles, throw grenades, and advance under simulated fire, Doss stood aside, holding only medical equipment. "You're in the wrong place. You're gonna get killed. A soldier without a weapon is a danger to everyone." Those words were repeated day after day. At night, in the barracks, whispers turned into direct accusations. Some believed Doss would put the entire unit at risk once real combat began. Others thought he was just a religious fanatic trying to prove a point. There were shoves, there were threats, there were real attempts to force him out. At one point, senior officers seriously considered discharging him for insubordination. A soldier who refused to carry a weapon seemed incompatible with any known military logic. But something unexpected happened. Doss did not respond with anger. He did not shout. He did not provoke. He kept waking up early. He kept training. He kept helping other soldiers when they got hurt. When someone collapsed from exhaustion during forced marches, Doss was the one who stopped to help. When a fellow soldier twisted an ankle or passed out, Doss was always the first to arrive. Slowly, even against their will, some began to notice. He was not weak. He was not slow. He was not afraid. He simply believed in something the rest of the world had temporarily suspended because of the war. Before shipping out to the front, an officer pulled him aside. "You can still quit. Out there, no one will respect your convictions, and when the bullets come, you won't be able to fight back." Doss listened in silence. Then he answered simply, "I'm not here to take lives. I'm here to save them." They had no idea that those words would soon echo across one of the bloodiest battlefields in modern history, or that the man considered the wrong soldier for war would soon become indispensable to the survival of dozens of others. When the military transport ship finally approached the islands of the Pacific, the atmosphere on board changed. The constant roar of the engines blended with heavy silence, broken only by short conversations and distant stares. Many of those men were about to face real combat for the first time. Training would be left behind. Theory would end there. The smell of oil, rust, and salt water clung to everything. Some soldiers hurriedly wrote letters home. Others stared into nothing, trying to look confident. There were nervous laughs, forced jokes, and empty promises that everything would be fine. Desmond Doss watched in silence.
He knew that from that moment on, nothing would ever be the same. When they landed on Okinawa, the sound of war arrived before the battlefield itself came into view. Distant explosions, the sharp crack of gunfire, and the constant roar of artillery created a suffocating atmosphere. The ground trembled beneath their feet. The air felt thick, almost impossible to breathe. Veterans whispered among themselves, "This isn't like anything we've seen before. The Japanese don't retreat. They fight to the last man." The terrain was a nightmare. Mud, craters, scattered bodies, destroyed equipment. Every step forward seemed to demand a price far too high. The enemy was entrenched, invisible, and patient. And then the first attack came. The noise was overwhelming. Machine guns opened fire almost simultaneously from multiple positions. Grenades exploded with enough force to throw men into the air. Screams mixed with confused orders. In seconds, forward movement turned into chaos. Desmond Doss had no weapon to raise, no way to fight back, but he had something the others did not immediately notice: clarity. While soldiers threw themselves to the ground, trying to understand where the fire was coming from, he ran in the opposite direction. Wherever someone cried out for help, he went. Wherever a body fell, he dropped to his knees. "Medic! Over here! Someone's been hit!" The first hours were a brutal shock. Open wounds, shrapnel, blood everywhere. Young men, many still with boyish faces, looked at him with pure fear in their eyes. "Don't leave me here. I don't want to die," Doss answered with a steady voice, even as his hands trembled. "Stay with me. Look at me. You're going to make it." He improvised bandages under enemy fire, dragged the wounded into shallow depressions in the ground, ignored explosions that landed dangerously close. More than once, shrapnel passed just inches from his body. Still, he did not stop. Some soldiers began to notice something strange. While many pulled back on instinct, that unarmed man moved forward, not out of bravado, not out of recklessness, but because someone had to stay. A soldier, wounded in the leg, grabbed Doss's arm tightly. "Why aren't you carrying a weapon? Are you crazy?" Doss answered as he tightened the bandage. "Because if I were, I might not be here right now." That day's battle ended without a clear victory. The advance was minimal. The casualties were massive. When night fell, exhaustion took over. Men slept sitting up, covered in mud with the distant sound of gunfire still echoing. At the improvised camp, some glances began to change. No one apologized, no one gave speeches, but there were no more laughs when Doss walked by. They had seen it. They had seen that when the shooting started, he did not run. They had seen that while many were thinking about surviving, he was thinking about saving others. And that was only the beginning. What none of them knew was that in the days ahead, that battlefield would demand something even more extreme, something that would leave Desmond Doss completely alone, facing the worst scenario imaginable. The true hell was still to come. The name did not appear on official maps. It was not listed in strategic reports or mentioned in press releases, and yet everyone who passed through that place knew it. Hacksaw Ridge was not just high ground in Okinawa, it was a sentence. The escarpment rose like a natural wall of rock and earth, more than 100 meters high. From the top, Japanese forces had a clear view of every American movement. Every advance was watched. Every attempt to climb was punished with heavy fire. Soldiers had to scale cargo nets hanging from the rock face, completely exposed, while bullets sliced through the air and explosions shook the structure. Many never made it halfway up. And when they finally reached the top, nothing improved. The terrain was uneven, filled with craters, shattered tree trunks, and camouflaged enemy positions. The enemy did not retreat. They attacked at night, in silence, emerging from the shadows. In that place, war took on a primitive form, pure survival. The first major assault to seize the top of the escarpment ended in disaster. The initial advance was followed by a violent counterattack. The American line collapsed. Communication broke down. The final order was clear: immediate withdrawal. Men began to descend in disorder. Some wounded were carried. Others were left behind, impossible to move quickly. Desmond Doss heard the order, and he stopped. He looked around and saw bodies scattered across the field, some motionless, others barely moving, faint cries for help, hands raised begging for rescue. If he had gone down at that moment, no one would have blamed him. It was what everyone else was doing, but something inside him would not allow it. Doss knelt beside a soldier badly wounded in the abdomen. The man was pale, struggling to breathe. "Don't leave me here," he whispered. Doss swallowed hard. "I'll come back for you." But he did not come back later. He stayed. When the last soldier began to descend the escarpment, Doss was still at the top. The sound of gunfire continued. The enemy was close. Any movement could give him away. Still, he began. He dragged the first wounded man to the edge of the cliff, tied a rope around the man's body, tested the knot carefully, and began to lower him inch by inch. Every movement required strength and precision. If the rope slipped, the soldier would die in the fall. When it was done, Doss dropped to his knees, exhausted. He could have gone down with him, but he heard another groan, and then another. That was when a phrase began repeating in his mind, and then on his lips, almost like a desperate prayer. "Please, Lord, help me get one more." There was no conscious heroism in that request, no desire for glory, only urgency. Doss stood up and returned to the battlefield. The night deepened, the sky darkened, the ground became even more treacherous. The enemy patrolled the area. Several times bullets passed dangerously close. Shrapnel tore through the air around him. Still, he continued, one man at a time, one life at a time. At one point, a grenade exploded close enough to throw him to the ground. His ears rang. The world spun. He lay still for a few seconds, waiting for the pain to arrive. It didn't. He got up and went back to look for someone else. When silence finally began to take over the top of the escarpment, Doss was alone, covered in mud, blood, and sweat. His hands were wounded, his body pushed to the limit. But below him, at the base of the cliff, men who should have been dead were beginning to move. What had happened that night was not yet fully understood, not by those who had been saved, not even by the army itself. But one thing was certain: Hacksaw Ridge would never be remembered the same way again.
Darkness fell over Hacksaw Ridge like a heavy cloak. The kind of night where sounds feel closer than they really are, and every movement could mean death. The fighting had slowed, but the danger had not. The enemy was still there, invisible, alert, waiting for any mistake. Desmond Doss remained at the top of the escarpment. The withdrawal had ended hours earlier. On the American side, it was believed that no one was still alive up there. For all practical purposes, that ground was lost, except to him. Doss moved slowly, nearly crawling in some places. Every step was calculated. He had no flashlight. He couldn't risk giving away his position. He relied only on his memory of the terrain, his instincts, and the faint groans cutting through the silence. One soldier was trapped beneath debris. Another had been hit in the shoulder and couldn't move. A third struggled to breathe, his chest rising and falling unevenly. Doss quickly assessed who still had a chance. There was no time for everyone. That was the cruelest decision of the night. He treated what he could, improvised bandages, murmured words of encouragement, and then began the process again. Drag, tie, lower. With every man saved, the same prayer: Just one more, Lord." The physical strain was brutal. His arms burned, his legs trembled, the rope cut into his already wounded hands. Several times he had to stop, press his forehead against the ground, and breathe deeply to keep from passing out. At one point, a shot passed so close he felt the air shift beside him. Doss froze. His heart pounded so loudly he feared the sound alone might give him away. Nothing happened. He moved again. At one point during the night, Doss came upon a soldier he recognized, one of the same men who had mocked him months earlier in training. The man was badly wounded, shrapnel lodged in his back. When he opened his eyes and realized who was there, his voice came out weak. "You?" Doss knelt beside him. "Stay with me." I didn't think you would." The sentence faded away. Doss didn't respond. He simply went to work. There was no resentment, no accusation, only urgency. The process repeated so many times that time itself lost meaning. Hours passed without him noticing. The moon moved across the sky. Cold seeped into his exhausted body. When the last man was lowered down the escarpment, Doss sat still for a second, staring into nothing. The top of Hacksaw Ridge was silent now. No more groans, no more calls for help. Only motionless bodies and the wind moving through the wreckage. He knew there was no one left to save. Only then did he descend. At the base of the escarpment, medics and soldiers stared in disbelief. Wounded men kept arriving, one after another, more than seemed possible. Who's doing this? Is there still someone up there? When they realized it was only one man, disbelief turned to shock. Doss collapsed to his knees the moment his feet hit the ground. Someone tried to help him up. He waved the hand away. How many? Someone asked. He didn't know. That night, no one counted numbers. No one thought about medals. No one imagined it would become history. All that mattered was that men who had been left to die were alive, and that the soldier many had called weak was the last to leave the battlefield. But the price had not yet been fully paid. The fighting would continue, and Desmond Doss would still face trials that would push his body and his faith to the absolute limit.
After the night at Hacksaw Ridge, nothing returned to normal. The Army did not know exactly what to do with what had just happened. There was no ready-made report for a man who, alone, had remained in enemy territory for hours and pulled dozens of wounded soldiers to safety under constant fire. Some officers were skeptical, others thought it was exaggerated. Numbers began to circulate, then were corrected, then revised again. But the soldiers knew, and that was enough. For the first time since the campaign began, the silence around Desmond Doss was no longer contempt, it was respect. Men who once kept their distance now waited for him before advancing. Some refused to climb the escarpment unless Doss was with them. There was a simple reason for that. If something went wrong, he would be there. Before another assault, an officer gathered the platoon. The attack was scheduled for Saturday, the day Doss, by religious conviction, set aside for rest and prayer whenever possible. The plan allowed no exceptions. Doss approached carefully. "Sir, I can't move forward until I've had a moment to pray." The request created immediate tension. Time was critical. The operation could not be delayed. Eyes met, impatient. Some soldiers sighed, irritated. Then something unexpected happened. One of the men stepped forward. "If he doesn't go, I'm not going." Another followed. "We'll wait." The officer hesitated. He knew it wasn't an orthodox decision, but he also knew what those men had seen. He nodded. Doss knelt. He didn't give a speech. He didn't ask for personal protection. He asked only for clarity and strength to keep saving lives. Minutes later, the attack began. The fighting was immediate and brutal. Short advances, Forced retreats, explosions too close for comfort. The enemy resisted fiercely. In the middle of the chaos, Doss ran back and forth, treating the wounded, guiding soldiers, pulling men out of craters under direct fire. Then the impact came. An explosion sent shrapnel in every direction. One piece struck Doss violently. He fell. For a few seconds, everything went silent. When he tried to stand, pain tore through his leg. Blood was flowing too fast. He knew what that meant. He wouldn't be able to continue like that. A soldier ran toward him. "You've been hit. We need to get you out of here." Doss struggled to breathe, but remained conscious. "There are other wounded men. You're the wounded man now." Even so, he refused immediate evacuation. He used what little strength he had left to guide another medic, pointing out where the most critically injured were. Only after there was nothing more he could do did he allow himself to be carried away. As he was lifted onto an improvised stretcher, bullets continued to fly past. At one point, another soldier was hit nearby. The stretcher fell. Chaos returned. Doss rolled off, even while wounded, and began crawling toward the other man. He dragged him to a safer position. Only then did he resume his own evacuation. But the worst was still to come. During the withdrawal, an enemy sniper fired again. The bullet struck Doss in the arm, passing straight through it. The pain was immediate and intense. The arm lost almost all strength. Still, he did not scream. He tore part of his uniform, improvised a splint with what he had, and kept moving. Every step became a battle against his own body. Hours later, he finally reached a safe zone. When medics examined him, the diagnosis was clear: severe wounds, fractures, significant blood loss. He was out of combat. For any other soldier, that would have been the end of the line. For Desmond Doss, it was simply another reminder that he was still alive. As he recovered, accounts of what had happened continued to spread through the ranks, not as heroic exaggerations, but as stories told in low voices, almost with reverence. If it weren't for him, I should be dead. The man who had refused to carry a weapon had become a moral and human reference point in the middle of a war that tried to crush every trace of compassion. And even wounded, even temporarily removed from the front, Desmond Doss was not finished. The army was beginning to realize that this story could not end in anonymity. Something greater was taking shape.
When Desmond Doss was pulled from the front lines, the fighting continued without him. Hacksaw Ridge would still claim lives. Okinawa would still be remembered as one of the bloodiest battles of the Pacific War. But something had changed irreversibly, not on the terrain, but among the men who had survived. The problem began when they tried to understand what had actually happened that night. The wounded kept arriving at aid stations long after the official withdrawal. Some had been listed as dead. Others didn't even appear on the initial evacuation rosters. Men showed up with treated wounds, stabilized, alive, and no one could say who had brought them down from the escarpment. Questions began to surface. Who brought you here? How did you get down? Who treated this wound? The answers were confused, repetitive, almost disbelieving. It was the medic. Which medic? That one without a weapon. Officers began cross-checking information. Early reports spoke of modest numbers, 10, maybe 15 men rescued. But as medical records were reviewed, something didn't add up. The numbers didn't match. Soldiers began stepping forward on their own to report what they had seen, not in search of recognition, but out of necessity. What had happened could not be reduced to a footnote. One man said he had been left unconscious at the top of the escarpment and woke up hours later already safe. Another said he felt the rope tighten around his body as he was being lowered, still under fire. A third said he saw Doss crossing open ground while bullets struck the dirt around him. The accounts matched in every essential detail. One person, one rope, the darkness, and the relentless repetition. Just one more.
The Army, accustomed to collective feats, didn't know how to process it. Stories of heroism usually involved assaults, captured positions, enemies neutralized. What was being described here didn't fit any known framework. When they finally reached a consensus, the number was revised one last time: 75. 75 men pulled from one of the deadliest points in Okinawa, alone, under fire, unarmed, for hours. Even then, there was internal resistance. Some officers feared it would create an uncomfortable precedent: a hero who never fired a weapon, a soldier who defied the basic logic of combat, an example that couldn't be replicated and couldn't be ordered. But the men from the front lines left no room for doubt. If it weren't for him, I wouldn't be here. He stayed when all of us went down. He went back again and again. When Doss finally recovered enough to hear the reports, he reacted with discomfort. He didn't correct numbers. He didn't confirm details. He didn't try to elevate anything. I only did what needed to be done. To him, the count didn't matter. One life would have been enough. But the Army had to decide what to do with it. Recommendations began moving up the chain of command. Documents crossed desks. Important names started reading the report with growing attention. For the first time, the story of Desmond Doss left the battlefield and entered the corridors where war was also fought, on paper, with signatures and political decisions. A quiet consensus began to form. This could not end in silence. The highest military decoration in the United States was not awarded lightly. It required irrefutable evidence, first-hand testimony, and a rigorous chain of validation. Every detail was questioned, every word weighed. And yet, the case moved forward, because there were no essential contradictions, because the accounts didn't fade with time, because the men who had been saved were still alive to tell the same story. Meanwhile, Doss slowly returned to life away from the front. He carried the permanent marks of battle in his body, in his arm, his leg, his bones, but he carried something heavier still: the awareness that he had survived when so many others had not. He didn't see himself as an exception. He didn't see himself as an example. He didn't see himself as a hero. But the war had decided for him. When the final recommendation was approved, one sentence followed it in silent implication: "This is bigger than the war itself." The man who had nearly been expelled from the Army was now about to enter history in a definitive way. And one moment still remained, the most unlikely of all: the moment when the entire world would hear the name so many had tried to ignore.
While the war had not yet fully ended, the name Desmond Doss was already circulating in places he never imagined he would reach. Not among soldiers in trenches, nor in field hospitals, but in quiet rooms where historic decisions were made with pens, not rifles. The process to award the Medal of Honor was exceptionally strict. Any exaggeration could collapse a case. Any inconsistency could end it altogether. It had to be proven beyond any doubt that the actions had occurred exactly as described. And there was one detail that deeply unsettled part of the military hierarchy. Doss did not fit the archetype of a war hero. He had not led an attack. He had not captured an enemy position. He had not eliminated the enemy. He had done something far more difficult to explain. He had saved lives where there should have been no survivors. Testimonies began to be formally collected, one by one. Men of different ranks, from different units, with no prior contact with one another. The stories aligned in a way that was impossible to ignore. He stayed when everyone else pulled back. He lowered men down the escarpment and went back up. He didn't stop even after he was wounded. There were no meaningful contradictions, no vanity. No one seemed to be trying to elevate their own role. Every account pointed to the same man, and every voice said, essentially, the same thing.
At one point, a senior officer asked the question that had been hanging in the air from the beginning. Why didn't he leave? The silence that followed was long, until one soldier answered, because someone had to stay. The final report described the actions in restrained, almost cold language, but behind the official wording was something impossible to hide: discomfort. Not with the act itself, but with what it represented. Doss's courage did not validate the war, it exposed it. It showed that even there, even in an environment built to destroy, it was still possible to choose to save. When the final decision was made, the Army did something rare. It did not soften the story. It did not reshape the actions to make them more acceptable. It did not hide the fact that the man being honored had never fired a weapon. The recognition would be complete, or it would not happen at all. Months later, with the conflict nearing its end, Desmond Doss was summoned to Washington. He wore his uniform simply, visibly uncomfortable with the attention. He walked with difficulty. The wounds from Okinawa had not healed. In the East Room of the White House, officers stood in formation, photographers were in position, and the room fell silent. Then the President of the United States entered, Harry Truman. Truman approached Doss, studied him for a few seconds, and before the formal ceremony even began, said something that would be recorded forever. "I'm proud to shake your hand. This is greater than being president." The words were not in the protocol, they were not required, but they were true. By placing the medal on the chest of a man who had never killed anyone, Truman was doing more than honoring a soldier. He was recognizing a kind of heroism that war almost always tries to erase. Doss remained silent. He gave no speech. He raised no fist. He simply kept his head slightly lowered, as if the weight of the medal were heavier than the medal itself. For many in that room, that moment closed an extraordinary story. But for Desmond Doss, nothing had been closed. He did not leave the White House as a hero in his own mind. He left as someone who had survived when others had not, and to him, that would always be the hardest burden to carry. The war had marked him forever, and the world at last knew his name.
Desmond Doss returned from the war different from everyone else, and at the same time, exactly like those who survived. He did not return as a symbol of victory. He returned as a reminder. The wounds from Okinawa never fully disappeared. The shrapnel, the fractures, the partial loss of movement, and the complications that would follow him for the rest of his life were only the visible part of what the war had left behind. There were also the difficult nights, the long silences, the memories that surfaced without warning. But unlike many, Doss never tried to turn what he had lived through into personal glory. He avoided speeches. He avoided headlines. He avoided the word hero. When people asked how he had managed to do what he did, the answer was always simple, almost disarming. "I just tried to help." He never accepted the idea that his story was extraordinary because of who he was. To Doss, the extraordinary part was every life that did not end on that escarpment, every family that never received a final letter, every man who was able to return home. Time passed. The war became a chapter in books, dramatization notice, then documentaries, then films. But for decades, the story of a soldier who saved 75 men without firing a single shot remained almost invisible to the general public. Perhaps because it didn't fit the traditional narrative of war. Perhaps because it raised a question that was too uncomfortable. What if courage doesn't mean destroying the enemy, but refusing to become like him? Desmond Doss lived long enough to see his name finally recognized beyond military circles. Even then, he never changed. He never rewrote his own story. He never tried to control it. He knew the truth didn't need exaggeration, and the truth was simple and brutal. In one of the deadliest places of World War II, when logic said to run, one man stayed. When war demanded killing, he chose to save. When everything said it was impossible, he kept saying, just one more. This story doesn't survive because it's inspiring. It survives because it's real, and because it forces us to confront something we would rather avoid. Even in the worst circumstances created by humanity, there is still a choice. The choice to stay, the choice to help, the choice not to cross a line that once crossed cannot be undone. Desmond Doss did not win the war. He won something far more difficult. He defeated the idea that violence is inevitable. And perhaps that is why so many years later, his story continues to echo, not as a battle cry, but as a quiet reminder of what is still possible. This script is based on real historical events documented by official military records and first-hand testimony. Some dialogues and specific scenes were dramatized for narrative purposes in order to give emotional depth and flow to the story. No central event, action, or outcome has been altered. If this story impacted you in any way, if it made you reflect on courage, faith, or humanity in extreme times, like this video so more people can discover this true story. Comment what stood out to you the most. Your perspective matters. And subscribe to the channel to keep exploring stories that war tried to bury, but time refused to erase. Because some stories were never meant to glorify war. They exist to remind us who we still are, even inside it.